This video will be a response to Pat and Wally from the Super Castle Beast podcast. I've left a link to the original clip in the description below, and I recommend watching it to get the full context of what they're saying. To try and stop this from being an absolute mess of a rant, I'm going to try and structure this video, going from things I only slightly disagree with, to what actually confused me to the point of starting a YouTube channel. So let's start with the area I most agree with them on, which happens to be Persona 5. While I agree almost universally with their take on Persona 5, they made some really serious errors. Specifically, Pat stated that a doctor that has almost certainly lost his license and was on his way to jail didn't get punished.
I got kicked out of the medical profession at a local hospital because of corrupt business practices and the fact that nobody gave a shit and people died. Don't worry, I fixed it. You can go back to your hospital job now. Everything is fine. It's like, no, that's not the problem.
Yeah.
That an abusive cult leader got off scot-free despite him getting arrested.
Hey, this cult leader's abusing your fortune teller friend because he's in a cult. Get him in trouble? No, you just made him good again, so now all the problems are solved.
Change the heart.
And that a child that was very much alive is dead.
Or in some cases, like, everyone at the hospital is now not evil. Sure, that kid is still dead.
So, while I do agree with them that some of the villains of Persona 5 got off way too easy, and about their general point about the theme of rebelling against society being undercut, they picked mostly terrible examples, and I don't think it was anywhere near as common as they portrayed it to be. Now, I will say that they did bring up the best example, which is Futaba's friend Kana being sexually exploited by her parents, and her parents basically getting away with it by promising to do better in the future. That's... The change of heart was so bad it actively hurt the game. I honestly can't imagine what the writers were thinking. There is only one reasonable explanation I could come up with, and that's that Kana's parents needed to finish the Hokkaido arc. Listen, we're all going to hell together. It's fine. So now that we got Persona 5 out of the way, let's move on to the Yukiko S-Link and why I think they're mostly wrong. I'll start by rolling a few clips of what they said to give you some context.
In defense of Yukiko's S-Link, dear bestest Wooly and shortest Pat,
We're never getting away from this one, huh?
recently been on a Persona kick and found myself remembering how much Pat hated Yukiko's social link, calling something along the lines of pointless.
It's pointless. That's the exact word I used.
Because ultimately she goes back to working for and devoting herself to the inn. While Yukiko isn't my favorite character, Chie's best girl, I found myself understanding Yukiko's experience in her social link. I would say that it's an Asian perspective, but I think it's more universal. It's the idea of having choice versus being forced to do something, and how sometimes young people need to explicitly be told, hey, you don't have to run the family business, follow in my footsteps, if you don't want to. Yukiko, throughout her social link and dungeon, felt like she was being forced and trapped in her family's inn, but once the burden of guilt was gone, she realized she actually enjoyed doing it and understood the responsibilities. Anyway, what are some general misunderstandings in popular?
Well, I'm
people
gonna
miss the forest for the trees,
no,
and it's
gonna,
like, yeah, I
you're
know,
not gonna-
yeah.
What the fuck you trying to do, man?
Yeah.
No, here's my problem. Is the problem with that S-Link is you are correct. Everything that he said was absolutely correct, and I understand it. The problem is that no one comes up to Yukiko and tells her you don't have to run the family business if you don't want to. That
Explicitly
thing never happens.
Yeah.
She just kind of goes from desperate to wanting to get away to going, you know what? Maybe being forced to run the family business is what would make me the happiest. Yukiko just gives up on her dream of doing anything but, because she's kind of aimless. All she knows is that she doesn't want to run the inn, but then she goes, you know, running the inn isn't so bad, and I do have happiness here, so I'm just going to ignore all the work that I've done to self-actualize myself as a different person and just run the family business. And it's disappointing.
And
So there's a lot of things Pat said that I really do agree with. Yukiko does start off desperate to get out of the inn and do literally anything else. But at the same time, she lacks the courage to do anything about it. By accepting her desire to leave the inn, she begins to self-actualize, and the arc starts with her making her own path instead of ignoring the problem and hoping someone else saves her. The thing is, if you pay attention, you'll notice something as the arc continues. While it does start out with her being incredibly eager to leave and start a new life, as the S-Link continues, her perspective seems to change. Now these aren't major changes, but they are things that paint her life in the inn and her leaving the inn in a new light. A few examples are the chefs helping her learn how to cook, and later on them and her parents praising her when she manages to cook something that isn't toxic. This, by the way, is a huge accomplishment for a P4 girl. To her feeling regret at having to leave the inn and fearing she'll never be able to come back. At a low point in the S-Link, she actually wishes the inn would close, just because it would make it easier for her to leave. So the reason I bring all of this up is because, at least to me as I played the game, all of this made me think the pressure on Yukiko, well, probably at least somewhat external, was mostly internal. Where Pat wishes her parents would say, "You don't have to do this," what I would have preferred would be for Yukiko to stand up to them and say, "I don't want to do this," only for them to promptly say, "That's fine, do what makes you happy," making her realize that this pressure and these expectations mostly came from herself, and that her perception of the inn, her perception of her parents, of the people around her, was false. I personally think that would be more in line with the idea of seeking the truth and the theme of the world being shrouded. Now, while I think we'd both agree either of these resolutions would have been better than what we actually got, because of this perspective, while disappointing, I didn't mind it when her moment of realization that she actually didn't want to leave the inn happened without her parents ever getting confronted, because, at least in my mind, her parents were never really a part of it. This was all a complex of Yukiko's making. However, even if I'm wrong, calling this arc useless is just unfair. Sure, it's flawed, but it's not useless. There's a good progression of events, from first facing your feelings of resentment, to acting on them in order to improve your situation, to slowly realizing that perhaps you aimed at the wrong target, that your goal was incorrect, to finally seeing clearly and realigning yourself with your own truth. So, while the execution was flawed, I think the overall theme and message of the arc managed to shine through, and that's most of what I wanted to say about Yukiko's S-Link. Let's move on to Kanji and Naoto.
But I think it's also when you put it alongside other minor versions of that happening throughout Persona in general, where changes aren't real changes because you don't want too much social unrest as a result of your rebellion, you know, or as a result of like stirring the pot too much.
Listen, I'm not gay, I'm just unconfident with girls. Listen, I'm not trans, I'm just unconfident with men. And I was just like, wait a second. We had a whole storyline about a character coming out of the closet, only to end with, "I'm not actually gay. Don't worry about it. No, I'm straight. I'm super straight."
Or the Naruto version, where it's like, yeah, the trans thing's not really exact. It's not what it's not. You think it is. You know what? But it's not actually. It was
the interview that I read where they were like, "No, Kanji's not gay. That's ridiculous. Why would you think that?" From one of the developers, and I'm like, I'm like, what? He's gay as the day is long. What are you talking about? It's the most interesting thing about the character. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. We literally have like gay and trans friends that are like super interested in those characters,
only to get fucking kneecapped by the devs.
By that idea. Yeah, exactly. So
hey, you know these things you identified with in these characters? JK, big mistake. Didn't mean it.
So
it was an accident of the translation.
Ridiculous. And again, and ultimately, but it's still there in a way where you like, I can.
The author's intent is not everything. Whether or not that's the intent, you cannot possibly tell me in its own vacuum that kanji is not gay.
It's more.
It's absurd.
It's more.
Okay. So literally everything he said was wrong. It was so wrong, I genuinely can't understand why he'd say it. I really wish he would have said why he thinks kanji is gay or why he thinks Naruto is trans, because making this video, I actively looked for things to suggest this. I came out with squat. Let's start with Kanji. So Kanji's story isn't a coming out story. It's not about him being unconfident around girls. It's a story about a boy that's unconfident about his own sexuality because of his feminine side and his feminine hobbies. Yes, at the start of the game, Kanji's shadow is very flamboyant. But even if you look at the shadow's dialogue pre and post fight, nothing there actually suggests that Kanji is gay. What his shadow is obsessed with is acceptance and masculinity. And that comes from Kanji's own crisis of masculinity. Kanji lost his father at a very young age, and he also developed feminine hobbies, things like drawing or making dolls, things like that. Kids, being the assholes that they are, made fun of him, called him gay, spread rumors about him, and generally bullied him for being different. That's probably when he started to overcompensate, and it's also when he started fearing that he was gay. That fear probably escalated substantially when he met Naoto and realized he liked her. This isn't just spelled out in his pro and post-boss fight dialogue. Most of his ass link is actually getting him to be comfortable with his hobbies, comfortable with making dolls, and admitting to other people that that's what he likes. Basically, embracing his feminine side, embracing his hobbies, embracing his personality. And that's the source of Kanji's fear, the source of the flamboyant shadow you see in his boss fight, and none of this makes him gay. Being gay is not a personality, it's not a hobby, it's not something that defines who you are or how you act or what you like. Liking drawing, liking ice skating, yes, even liking girls with short hair isn't gay. None of that makes you gay. Liking dick? Now that makes you gay. And that's something Kanji never actually shows any interest in. Not once during the entire game. There's no point that he shows any attraction to any of the male characters. And there are multiple times where he shows some attraction towards some of the female characters. So yes, by looking just at 4, all on its own, I have to repeat the developer's question. What on earth makes you think Kanji is gay? This is an actual question, by the way, and if anyone has actually gotten to this point of the video, if you still think Kanji is gay, or you used to think Kanji is gay, can you please write a comment and explain why? Because I'm drawing a blank here. And the same goes for Naoto. Her story isn't about being unconfident around man. She's had this dream to be a detective, and as she grew up she realized that she can't fit that mold as a woman. Not the mold she made for herself, and not really the mold society made. So she tried to reshape herself. To fit into the societal mold, to this concept of what being a detective is, instead of making her own path, instead of breaking the mold and making a new idea. There's a reason she doesn't want to go through the procedure. There's a reason she's objecting to it. At least, in my mind, it's because she doesn't want to be a man. She wants to be a detective, and she actually resents the fact that society expects her to be a man in order to fit that role. And she also probably resents herself for thinking that only men fit that role. As she said herself, in her mind, a detective is this cool guy, and that's something she can't be. So, just like Kanji, this isn't really something you need to read between the lines to understand. This is not something that's hidden. It's spelled out in the game. This isn't like Yukiko's social link where there was this major flaw. Kanji's S-Link is a good story about someone getting over his masculinity crisis and accepting himself. Naoto's story is a good story about someone refusing to change themselves and deciding to do what they love as who they are, not who society expects them to be. Persona 4 isn't really about changing yourself. It's about facing the truth about yourself, not hiding from it or hiding it from others. To uncompromisingly be yourself, to be true to yourself, and let everyone around you know who you really are. And I don't really care if you're gay or straight, cis or trans. I think that's a message we can all identify with, and I think that's what's at the heart of this game and what's at the heart of these stories. It's why I love them. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll try to make the next video better. Thanks.